Welcome to another episode of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, the show that asks the questions that you should be asking but may not be asking, the show that brings you the information so that you can be enabled to make more informed decisions for both you and your family. Today we have a special guest with us by the name of Paula McVeigh. Miss Paula, welcome to our show.
Thank you.
Miss Paula, tell us a little bit about your background and what you do.
I have worked in numerous capacities, an instructor for 23 years. I've been with Early Head Start, child care since I was 15, so a lot of years involved in that.
Okay, with your experience, we're going to stick to one subject today, which is child abuse.
Okay.
What is child abuse?
Child abuse would be anything that would harm, belittle, hurt a child, basically anything that you could get arrested for doing to a stranger adult. You're looking at, it's also wrong to do it to a child. It could be physical, hitting, beating, biting, harming in some physical way. It could be mental, belittling, calling names, putting him down, and it can be sexual also.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, what does a child abuser look like?
That's just it. They look just like you and me. There is no way to look at them and say, ha ha, this is a child abuser. In many cases, we used to believe that the child abuser was a stranger. We went through years of stranger danger training, and the big thing is it's not the stranger. It's probably someone in your family or someone close to your family that knows you well.
So there's no specific place that they work or they shop or
No.
they live, they're everywhere.
They're everywhere.
Okay, so who can we trust? We tend to trust the elderly, but you tend to say no. So who can we trust?
You can't trust anybody. You constantly need to be checking on your kids. Listening to your kids is so, so important. And just not putting your guard down at all, because there is that possibility that somebody's going to get to your child. They used to say, as far as sexual abuse, think of 3 people, and of those 3 people, pick one, and that person would be sexually abused. I just read this morning where they were saying, looking at 1 out of every 10 kids is going to be abused. Also looking at, they say, every 10 seconds a child is abused, but out of that, only 1/3 of the children are reported with this abuse. So there's 2/3 out there that are getting hurt and no one's standing up for them.
Wow, that's sad. What should we be aware of, Miss Paula?
Any changes in your child's behavior, if they go from being open and friendly to being withdrawn and closed. One of the biggest things we can do to help the children is not force them to go over and give hugs and to be friendly to people, period. If Aunt Susie bought him a dress, well, that's fine and dandy, but don't force the child to go over and give her a hug. If the child doesn't want to sit on Aunt Joe's lap, hey, honor that child. And too many times, unconsciously, what we do is tell the children, you have to go and be nice to the elderly or be nice to that adult. And we're setting the kids up by doing that.
Wow, that is so sad.
It is.
So by telling them you have to be nice to your aunt or your uncle, we're setting them up.
We're setting them up.
Oh,
And a lot of times the child abuser, he doesn't abuse always at one time. He may be grooming the parents and the children to fall into his thoughts and his system. A lot of times when we have babysitters, whether they're teenagers or elderly people, we need to understand that we need to talk to the child afterwards. Did you have a good time? What did you do? What didn't you do? And be looking at the children, trying to help them open up. And a lot of times what we do is shut them down. We tell them, you have to do what the babysitter says you have to do. And again, that's setting them up. You should be addressing it. You know what's right and wrong. And babysitter, this is what they can and can't do. I'll be following up with it, you know, because sometimes the children won't come to us. Other times they come to us, but we're too busy. And the child might say, Mommy, I know I did bad. I went across the street to Johnny's house. You went across the street? Why did you do that? You know you're not supposed to do that. Get to your room. Now, if Johnny's daddy had sexually molested him while he was over, do you think he's going to tell you after you get mad because he crossed the street? No.
That's true. That's true. We know that sometimes even parents molest their children. What can cause a parent to become an abuser?
I would say 99% of the time they were abused as a child themselves. And there's probably that 50-50 in there. 50 of them says, I'm not going to hurt anybody like this. And the other 50 will go out and hurt just like they have been hurt. So, and you'll see this a lot with the people in jail. Probably 93% of them have been abused, beaten, sexually abused, definitely verbally abused all their life. And so it's a circle, and it's a hard circle to get out of if you are one of the victims. But I would also say today it's becoming easier to get help, to get assistance, and to reframe your mind thought on it was their fault, not mine, as a child.
Now, for every abuser, we learn that it's not just that one child that they've abused, and there's a quote or a suggestion as to how many children or people that one abuser have abused. And what is that number, please?
I have heard about 50 to 75 other children. This is also a generational type of thing. So it's just not one child, this child right here now, but it will be this child's friends who come for sleepovers. It will be this child's, maybe the nieces, nephews. And that's one of the main things to understand. An abuser is not just male or female. It's both. And a lot of times we look at a male saying they're more likely to do the abusing, and we're finding out through Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, church members, etc. This is not true. Everybody could possibly be.
That's so sad, Ms. Paula. This is a very touchy subject, you know, for a lot of our audience also, but we do have to address this so that when our children come to us, we know how to address them so we can meet their needs. What are some of the signs that a child have been abused, Ms. Paula?
Well, physical abuse could be slaps, it could be belt buckles, it could be cords, extension cords, anything like that that'll leave a mark. I know of one case where a child was beaten with an encyclopedia, and his father was kind of, what was the stepfather, was kind of suggesting that he could beat the information into the child. I know now that this child had a learning disability. There was no way he was going to be able to do that assignment. Physical abuse, it can often be the child shows pain in sitting or standing. There could be redness. There could be bloody underwear. It could also, unfortunately, be lacerations or harm to the mouth, where the child is being forced to do sexual activities that nobody should be forced to do.
Oh, wow. So as an adult, once you suspect something like that, you of course suggest that they call, but you have no physical evidence as far as what you see is all you can actually report.
You don't have to know who did it, how it was done, when it was done, where it was done. You call the 1-800-96-ABUSE number here in Florida, and you report it, and you let them go out and check it out and let them make the decision. Do not try to investigate on your own. You are not trained to do that. You just get that gut feeling, those butterflies in your stomach, that headache sometimes that'll come when you're trying to figure out what's going on. Just call the number and let them deal with it.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm sure that everyone heard that number. We'll put that number again. Child abuse is not a new thing. But we know that the internet is not making it easier either on the parents. What can parents do in this day and age to protect their children?
There's all types of different parental guides that you can either put on the phone, on the internet, that will help you survey what your child's getting into on the internet. And it's scary. It's even, I've recently seen the thing on YouTube that there's some dangerous stuff going on there too. Being aware, not just letting your child spend hours talking on the phone, playing with the phone, being on the internet, and not having some one-on-one time with you. And checking, because they've always got a friend who is very computer savvy that knows how to
That's
get
true.
around these things. But also, the children are going to copy you. So if you're doing these things, don't be surprised if, and by these things I mean spending hours on the computer, but then you're not spending any time with them. Making sure you let the children know over and over and over, especially with the word secrets. I get very nervous with that one, because a lot of times the offender will say, well, this is your and my secret. We're not going to tell mom that I took pictures of you in the nude. And if you tell anybody, I may hurt or kill your mom or your baby brother. So now you have this 4-year-old who is basically protecting his family by not telling, but it's eating him up inside. And sooner or later, he will break. But the damage that's been done is very hard to correct.
Right.
So that's one of the biggest things, is watching your children when you go into department stores, keeping them with you. Don't let them go to the toy department and play there and you not have your eye on them, because it can happen in your home. I know of one case where the little boy was molested by an older child while dad was watching the football games. It can happen when you're out anywhere. So teaching your child how to keep themselves safe. Most often they will say, fight back, scream, yell, this is not my mom. If you get lost, don't let anybody take you out of the building. But see if there's another mom with several children there, sometimes is a useful thing, rather than going up to a complete stranger who doesn't have children. Usually the mom with children will be aware, oh my gosh, how can I help this child without putting myself in danger at the same time.
Right. Now, going back to the word secret that you just mentioned, like we know that parents, or spouses like to have surprise parties for their, significant other. And they like to get the children involved. So they'll tell the child, don't tell mommy, it's a secret. So you're saying no secret at all?
I would say don't use the word secret at all, but just what you said, use the word surprise. This is a surprise. We're going to bake a cake for mommy. It's her birthday tomorrow. We'll tell her tomorrow. So that you're not telling the child, don't tell anybody, because I've told the child, if anybody tells you to keep it a secret, you come straight to me and tell me about it, so that I can scoop it up and figure out what's going on here. And this could be their teachers, the local policeman that walks up and down in front of the store. You're not safe from anybody, so you've got to be looking at everybody with that jaded eye. And if you have your child in Boy Scouts, church groups, any clubs, this type of thing, join yourself. Be there with them, and that way you know what's going on,
Right.
instead of just waiting for this huge change in your child's behavior and going, what's happening? My daughter and her husband have been Scoutmasters, but they became Scoutmasters because my grandson Andrew was going to be going, and he went through the whole thing. He's an Eagle Scout, but they were there every step of the way. They knew exactly what was going on. And even when campouts and that type of thing, they were there.
Okay.
So don't take chances with your children.
Okay, so even the school outings, you know, how they have the field trips, you would encourage parents to also attend. We know that the schools also, Ms. Paula, they tend to, they have a class called sex ed. And through this class, they give our children a lot of information. But we also see that some of these kids are overly informed.
Right.
What says you on that?
If it's bad informed, I would say the child is probably going to act out with dolls. He's going to have more info than you would think a 3 or a 4-year-old would have at that age. But being very, I'd say, proactive with your children, call the body parts by their proper names. Don't give them these stupid little fancy names that a lot of people will, because then if that child has to report to somebody, they're saying, he hurt my vagina, instead of saying he hurt my pocketbook, he hurt my nest, all these other little names, because somebody who's not trained is not going to realize this child is giving you information. And that's a lot of the problem. We come up with all these cutesy names, and we don't address it exactly what it should be called.
Okay, thank you for that. Children lie, you know. We know that for a fact that children lie. So what says you in the case where a parent is not sure whether or not their children are telling the truth? What should they do?
The first thing I would say is keep in mind the younger the child, the less likely they're lying, because if they lie and say, he touched me in my private part, he knows he's going to be causing trouble and stirring up things, and he's going to be in trouble too. So the younger the child, the less likely that they're lying about sexual abuse and that. Looking for any physical signs also, as you're changing the child at night, as you're bathing them, checking to see are there bruises, are there bloody spots, are there questionable marks. And you'll get a lot of, I tell a lot of my students, if you ask a child, how did you get that mark? And he goes, and he starts looking through the sky for answers. He's probably trying to remember what he was told to tell if anybody questioned it. And we get kids all the time, well, I fell down the stairs. And then the teacher realizes later they live on the bottom apartment. There are no stairs in their home. I fell off my bike. And the kid later shares that, no, he doesn't have a bike. Anything that raises that doubt or those red flags, question and check and make sure. I would say you can't overcheck, because even the children who are very good, you'll have cases where the little boys will act up terrible and everything, but I've had cases where the little girl would be the teacher's pet. She always wants to help. She wants to go help the neighbor across the street. And sometimes those kids are in prime condition to be taken in by a abuser or a sexual abuser because they are craving attention so much.
Wow.
And they'll do anything to get a positive stroke that sometimes they're putting themselves in positions that they're not able mentally, physically to get out of.
Oh, wow, this is serious. Wow. I recently learned also that tickling a child is not good. It's a form of child abuse?
It could be if you continue tickling a child and he's going stop, 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 and let's say he ends up peeing himself because you're tickling him so hard, you're taking that choice away from that child as whether he wants to be tickled or not. The little tickles, no, I'm not going to be concerned about those, but the ones where you hold a person down, again, think of it if I was a stranger and I started tickling you and you're going, stop it, it hurts, or stop it, and I don't stop, then I could be considered, tickling would be considered an abusive type of situation. A lot of it has to do with the adult control. A lot of these adults have got to have control because they didn't have any as a child. So now they've got to feel that they've got to show that control and abuse that control.
Oh, wow. For that poor child, the embarrassment
Yes.
if they urinate on themselves.
Yes.
Okay. Wow. Is there a statute of limitation as to how long you can report a child abuse?
It's going to depend on state by state, possibly county by county. The big thing is still report it, even if it's been 25, 30 years, because what you don't know is the other tracking record that this person may have left behind. And again, we've had many great-grandfathers. I haven't heard of the grandmothers yet, but I'm sure it's there. Great-grandfathers who have molested their daughters' friends, their granddaughters, the nieces and the nephews. And so even though it might be out of the statutes for me at my age, I may be helping other people open those doors and look to see if this is still continuing all these years later and all these children later.
Yes, I agree, because look at some of the cases that are now popping up, you know, all over social media from some of the iconic people that we knew,
Yes.
you know, from our time. You know, this is very, very sad. Um,
And this is part of the thing too. Society has kept quiet for so long and not protected these children
Yeah.
that this is going over generations after generations type of thing. So we need the whole group of society to say, you know, enough is enough, and that we have to take responsibility for saving today's kids because they're going to be tomorrow's futures.
And it doesn't look too bright right now, does it?
It doesn't look too bright.
That's so
It is
sad.
getting better. I mean, child abuse has only been acknowledged for about 125 years, but how different cultures will see different discipline, different behavior, and this type of thing. It's part of those in there too, and a lot of parents, through their cultures, through their social network, still believe the way our grandparents were oftentimes beaten for an infraction. Keeping in mind too, when we talk about beating, the higher your hand comes, the more likely you're going to be enraged. And when you bring it down, the more danger, because I may be aiming for that child's butt, but if I hit him in the eye or the head or the ear, I could cause them to be blind or deaf.
You have no control of the hand coming down.
You lose control, and that's part of the whole thing. You're losing control. You're never mad for what you think you're mad for. It's all these other things that are, and then the child maybe messes in their pants. They're a 2-year-old, they're potty training, and the parent goes ballistic. you're mad for a whole bunch of other things. This is just the icing on the cake. And so when you respond that way, you're getting out even more out of control.
For the parent that becomes a child abuser, are there any hope so that they don't get there? You know, is there anything that they can do so that they don't get there, Ms. Paula?
I would say get some counseling to deal with your anger, to get some parenting classes to understand the other ways of disciplining. Keeping in mind disciplining means disciple, comes from the word disciple. It's to teach. And I get people all the time that say, well, to spare the rod is going to spoil the child. You have never seen a shepherd use his staff to hit sheep. He uses it as an extension of his arms to pull the sheep back to safety. And a lot of times we have to change what was done to us and admit that in some cases our parents may have abused us, that we are going to make a commitment to not pass that on to the next generation.
Yes.
But it's hard. It can be extremely hard, but it's worth it.
Yes, it is.
It's worth it.
For the sake of the children, it is definitely worth it. Ms. Paula, what can we do as parents? What can we do as a community to prevent this from happening to our children?
I would say be more aware of who your kids are around. Get a lot of what we discussed today, get it out. Understanding how much anger can control you. And teaching and giving the children and teaching them that they have a choice to protect their bodies and that no one should touch them where their bathing suit touches. I used to tell my children, if you fall on a stick and the doctor wants to look at your private area, then you tell mommy as soon as mommy gets there so that I can make sure it's on the up and up. I don't tell them, don't ever let anybody look at you there because I might not be there right at that minute and it is an emergency. So trying to be careful with the warnings you give them to the realization and realistic world we live in, especially when the parents are away from home so much.
Ms. Paula, thank you so much for coming
very
to our
welcome.
show. As you've heard, we've gotten a lot of information today from Ms. Paula so that we can be better informed for our children especially. Until next time, for another episode of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.